Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Something I've been meaning to try for a long time is a technique called granulation, and it's an ancient technique that first appeared in Sumeria, from what I've read, around 3000 BC, so it's been around for about 5,000 years. Uh, the way it works is they would take a piece of sheet metal, like sheet gold, and then make little balls, glue them on there using hide glue made from an animal's hide, and then heat the thing until the gold balls fuse to the sheet and create interesting, intricate patterns. If you look up granulation and ancient jewelry, you'll find all sorts of examples of it. It's really kind of an interesting technique. So I thought I was going to try to do something similar to that. I will not be using gold. I will be using silver, and I don't have a kiln, so I can't do a controlled heat like that. We're going to try and do an alternative method and see how it works. So we'll give it a try, but before we do, I need to thank some groups of people. The first group is my patrons over on Patreon. They're my core group of supporters. They are a great group of people with a lot of artistic talent and a ton of knowledge. So I appreciate not only their financial support, but I appreciate the great community over there where we can all interact with each other and share ideas and resources and things like that. It's a really nice place, so thanks for making it that way, and thanks for your support. The other group are my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 25,100, which is awesome. Thank you for that. I truly love hearing from you in the comments section, so feel free to leave a comment. I love to hear your story of how you came to be interested in jewelry and what you're trying to learn. So that kind of stuff is interesting to me, and I do appreciate it. Thank you also for the kind contributions. The Buy Me a Coffee is a super thanks. Buying my ebooks or my merch, all of that stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your help. So thank you for that. All right, well, let's try and do a little bit of granulation. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks. I've almost filled this one up. We're going to have to break another one out here. This particular model has a gauge to inches to millimeters chart, which I find pretty handy. But the real feature for me is the dot matrix in the background here. It helps me to draw better pictures when I'm sketching up my designs. When I first started my YouTube channel, I started recording every project that I did, and I've come to really value that because I can go back and see how I did something. If I want to recreate it, or if I want to show someone else how I did it, or whatever. It's nice having a record of that. And after you make so many things, you can't remember everything that you did, so it's nice to be able to look back and think about that. So here's what we're going to do today, at least that's my plan. So like I said, reticulation involves, originally, I keep saying reticulation instead of granulation, so if I say that during the video, it's because I'm getting old and I can't always summon up the right word. So granulation started out, like I said, way back when, and with the idea that you took a piece of sheet metal and fused little balls to it made out of the same material, particularly in gold. Alright, well here's today's project, at least I hope it will be. We're going to try and do some granulation in a different way than it was traditionally done. Like I said, granulation was originally done with a piece of sheet gold and some little gold balls glued down in patterns, and then the whole thing was heated to a point where the gold would fuse together, and then you'd have an interesting pattern on the sheet. So I'm going to do something a little different. We're going to use 22 gauge silver sheet here, which is 0.66 millimeters if I recall. I used some very fine wire. I have a spool of 26 gauge round wire here that I'm going to use to cut the pieces of wire that I'm going to melt into the balls that we're going to use. And I did some prototyping here so you can see how big the ball is going to be. There's one. So little tiny balls like that. So we're going to have a whole bunch of these soldered to the outside of a piece of sheet. So, and notice I said soldered because I'm not going to fuse them. It's harder to fuse silver than it is gold, I think. So, and I want to make sure we have a really good connection where they stay permanently. So, people do it with silver, I think, in a kiln all the time. At least I've heard that. So I don't have any experience with kilns really. So So here's my idea. I went ahead and I traced this pattern that I drew, and I cut a piece of 22 gauge sheet. And my thought is, you want to, from past experience with other kinds of soldered on designs, I have better luck with them looking the way I want them to look if I do it after the ring is round, even though that's a little bit harder to do. So I went ahead and made this round after I glued this pattern on here. And the way I'm going to try to make this happen is I'm going to use a little tiny ball burr with my Dremel and gouge out little dimples all the way around on these spots here. And then we'll take this paper off and burn off any residue. And then I'm going to use some easy paste solder and paste in the little dots there, and then place individual balls in those spots. Heat the whole thing until it solders down throughout that. And I'm hoping that we'll get a pretty neat pattern. We'll see. It's kind of an experiment. I didn't line those up very well, did I? After that's done, we'll solder the ends together here and round it out the rest of the way. It's not perfectly round at this stage. But I think that's my plan. So let's give it a try and see how it works. The ball burr is very small and they do jump around, so I'm going to have to try and do my best to keep things as stable as I can and take some of my inability to hold it in place while that thing's spinning out of play. So I may clamp this in a vise or something. We'll see. All right, let's go over and do that. So I think I'm going to use this little vise thing here. We'll try just holding it in there. It doesn't have to be super tight. I just need it to not move around too much. That's pretty good. And just take a look at this tiny ball burr I have. See if you can see that I'm trying to get it to be in focus. Pretty small though. Smaller, about the same size as those little balls that I made. So let's this would be better to do if you had a Fordham tool, which goes a little bit slower because it's going to be less likely to chatter around on you. I unfortunately do not have a flex shaft kind of big motor tool like that, so someday when I save up my pennies I'll get one of those. But alright, so let's try doing this. I'm just going to kind of slowly go down and try and fill this up with little dimples. Let's try doing the next one. That might be a cool way to just do a design on a ring itself. I might have to try that and do some rings that way. Huh. Okay, well let's remove the paper and then we'll start soldering on little balls after we make some, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to burn the rest of this paper off of here. Alright, I'll let this pickle for a few minutes, get some of the oxides. While that's doing that, we can go ahead and make some balls. I'll show you how to make the little balls. I'm using really thin wire because I want it to be able to knock. So normally if I was doing this with bigger balls, trying to make a whole bunch of the same size bigger balls, I would probably use thicker wire. To get little tiny balls the size I want to use for this, cutting the length of wire like an 18 gauge would be super short, so it'd be really hard to measure and get it close on each one. So with a skinnier wire, I can cut a longer piece and be more precise and still get a little tiny ball, if that makes any sense. Okay, and an easy way to get a whole bunch of same size pieces of wire is I decided on 7mm for this, so I drilled a 7mm hole in this block of wood. And then I can just stick this in here, snip it off. I can actually do about 4 in each hole here. And then just dump them out on my charcoal block. That's probably enough for a first batch here. I'm going to just spread these out on a charcoal block. Charcoal blocks tend to make a little better balls. You don't want to have misshapen balls, so you want to use your charcoal block. Oh, my setup is right here. I usually mention that early in the video, but I forgot on this one. I think it's sort of satisfying making balls for some reason. Oops, blew that one away. That one too. That one's, oh, they both right there. I'll do this without knocking out the table. Okay, so you see we have a whole bunch of uniform tiny balls to try to do some granulation. That's good, I didn't say reticulation. If you are interested in reticulation, I have a video about it up there. I think it's fun trying to do stuff like this. I thought about doing this for a long time. Just never got around to trying it. Well, I think I got them all. Okay, so I'm going to let that sit for a bit while that ring pickles a little bit. I'll be right back. Okay, like I said, I'm going to use hard silver paste solder. I never much used paste solder in the past, but I've been converted a little bit. I think I like some situations like this where it might actually really be helpful. I didn't pickle the balls. Let's just do up to about there first to start with. I don't suspect I'll have any problems just because these are a little oxidized. Oops, back here. This is going to take a lot of balls. And I don't mean that figuratively. Alright, well let's start there and see how that goes. I'm just going to heat it. And we need to remember when we're heating things with disparate mass like this, the band has a lot of mass, these little balls don't. So most of the heat I'm going to apply to the band, because it takes longer for that to reach the soldering temperature, which is 1450-ish degrees. I think I'm going to not do it over the magnesia block, maybe. Let's try a little different strategy, because some of those came off when I was picking at them. You always want to try and pry those off if you can to make sure they're really on there. It's less embarrassing for your balls to fall off at home than it is for them to fall out after you sell your piece of jewelry. Okay. I'm going to do one more little stage on this area. Then I'm going to pickle it for a while longer. I'm doing a little more individual placing than I had hoped, so you'll have to try this and tell me if you think it was an effective technique or not. I don't know. That's why we experiment, right? Chasing this thing around. Alright, I'm going to let that pickle for a while and clean up. I think I'm just going to show you little sections as I get them set up. So I have another section set. too, I think. Okay, so we can get those ones on there. Okay, I'm going to stop because I'm moving things around and not it's not going as smoothly as I had hoped. I'll be back in a sec. I'm going to continue working my way around. It's going to take a while, so I'm not going to make you watch me do the same thing over and over again. So I'll be back in a few. Okay, so it's time to talk about successes and failures. So I think overall it's a success. However, this particular rendition of this, I'm going to have to rework or scrap. So I did lose some balls along the way here, and I could go back and I could resolder those on and repolish. But I think I'm going to mark this one down as a learning experience. And I'll probably take some pictures from this side here. These two are pretty good for the thumbnail. I'm disappointed. I was going to try and get pictures on this one here where they come together because I kind of like it. But then I lost a bunch of balls right there. So learning experience, I think. That taught me a lot, actually. That taught me a lot about what I could get by with, what I can't get by with. And so I'm curious, how would you go about doing something similar? What would be your strategies and techniques? Since mine is only partially successful, I'm always glad to hear some better ideas. So tell me what you think. Tell me where I went wrong. Tell me how you would do it different. So, all right. Well, thanks for watching. I'll get some better pictures. One other thing I would note about this was time-consuming and really quite tedious as far as making all the little balls and then positioning them the way I was doing it. I would imagine that doing regular granulation, even in the traditional way, is going to take some time because you're gluing on little tiny bits of silver to some other silver or gold. And so that's going to be pretty tedious as well. And
The other thing I was going to mention was I'm not sure how much that helped to do the little dimpling with the ball burr. Um, I did end up with some spots where I missed the boat on getting some of the balls into the little dots that I created. So again, I'll have to think about that for a while and see if I can come up with any other solutions, because I like the idea and I'll revisit it at some point probably.
Okay, well that was faux granulation. I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe it stimulated some ideas for you, hopefully. If it did, maybe consider giving me a like on my video. That really helps my channel get promoted, and I do appreciate that a lot. I'd also love it if you'd take a moment and check out my main channel page on YouTube here. I have 560-ish videos now. I've been doing 3 per week for about almost 4 years now, so I have a lot of content over there. The more recent ones being a little bit more finished than the original first ones. If you want to laugh, go back and look at some of the very early ones. Um, but there's a lot of good content over there, lots of ideas for projects, some skills that may be useful for beginners, all sorts of fun stuff over there. So check out a few videos. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There's no cost to do that. But it really helps my channel if you do, so thanks for that in advance. You should also visit the video description down below. There's some important information about this video as well as some important links. So there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. It's a nice place. There's multiple tiers of membership, the lowest being just getting rid of the YouTube advertisements, which would be worth it just for that, I think. The tiers above that have additional privileges, including special tutorials, voting privileges on upcoming projects, live stream sometimes. It's a nice group and it's fun to interact with them, so I like doing those too. But yeah, there's different tiers. Check that out. It's a great place. You can visit my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I talked about at the beginning. Those are handy and a great way to keep track of your projects and a history of what you've made. And there's also a link to my ebooks, the most recent one being 2024's. It has a page for each of the tutorials I did during 2024, and on that page is a link to the video as well as extra information. There's a picture of the sketch I drew, a picture of the final outcome, a list of ingredients, a difficulty rating, and some notes I made about it post-project. Oftentimes I learn something when I do a project, so I put stuff like that in there, whether I would change the way I did it or do it, try to get a different outcome, or things I ran into that were really hard, or stuff like that. So there's a lot of good information in there, a whole bunch of projects, and it's a really nice way to support my channel if you get one of those. If you get both of them, 2023s and 2024s, there's a $5 discount. And if you do that now during my Black Friday sale, you get 20% off. So you can do that in both the merch store on my website for some different merch that's over there, as well as the ebooks themselves. So take advantage of it while they're on sale. Okay, well thanks for watching today. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Take care. Happy silversmithing.